We are very lucky to be joined by a special guest today on the show, cognitive neuroscientist, as well as the author of The Romance of Reality, How the Universe Organizes Itself to Create Life, Consciousness, and Cosmic Complexity. Bobby Azarian, welcome back to the Damage Report.
Thanks for having me, John. Super happy to be here.
We're glad to have you here, especially right on the cusp of your book coming out. It comes out about a week from when we're recording this on the 28th of June. Tell us about the book.
So the book is about an emerging scientific paradigm that is a lot different from the previous scientific paradigm or worldview. And that old worldview basically looked at life as something of an accident, something that is transient. And basically it says that life has no cosmic significance. And this emerging scientific worldview, which is based on complexity science, and complexity science is sort of an integration of all of the sciences, this new paradigm says that the universe is becoming increasingly complex and that life is a natural manifestation of the laws of physics and the evolutionary dynamics that emerge from those laws. So it basically says that life emerges inevitably in the cosmos, and that there's this statistical tendency toward higher intelligence and toward beings that can leave their planet of origin and sort of spread through the cosmos. Carl Sagan had a famous quote that says, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." And that's what this book is really about, that in a way, the universe, the matter in the universe is sort of waking up through life and conscious agents. So it's a big idea. It's kind of abstract, but it actually has some very practical implications for how we design our social, political, and economic systems.
So no, that's obviously incredibly intriguing that there would be this sort of sense of semi-inevitability to it. Why would that be the case? Why would there be a natural tendency towards greater complexity?
So the book's called The Romance of Reality because it is something that's mysterious and romantic. I don't think we have the answer to that question, but we do see that the universe has this tendency towards complexity, such that, for example, on planets that have sufficiently similar geochemistry, like the Earth's geochemistry, you will get life on those planets. So life might not be super common, it might not be everywhere, but the new thinking is that if you have the right conditions, if you have the right ingredients, that thermodynamic processes will kind of cook up life. So this has implications for whether there's intelligent life out there. And this theory would say that, yes, there are billions to trillions of Earth-like planets that probably harbor some form of life, and that on a certain number of these planets, that there might even be intelligent life.
Interesting. So is this sort of like a cosmic level version of natural selection, where rather than natural evolution, rather than sexual selection being the tool, some essential components of physics, because you talk about challenges, sort of helping to spur life to greater complexity, is it like that kind of, that there are these natural pressures, and the things that will tend to survive them are things that are more either complex or intelligent? I don't have obviously nearly the level of knowledge. I'm trying to bring to this what I have.
I mean, they're new ideas, but the way this paradigm looks at things is that the biological process of evolution is part of this larger cosmic evolution process. So if you want to go back before life, we have the formation of ordered structures like stars and planets. And we needed to have those before we had life. But biological evolution, Darwinian evolution through natural selection, is a continuation of this process. And it's basically a process where living systems, which are complex adaptive systems, learn through evolution, through adapting. And really, you can see evolution as a knowledge creation process. So what happens is life is striving to survive, and by dealing with the challenges that we face, we have to come up with solutions. And this need to find solutions to our existential challenges is the engine of complexification and progress. So you kind of get this view of life being this integrated system where everything's connected. So human civilization is forming something like a global brain on Earth. Mm-hmm. And that analogy makes sense because there are 80 billion neurons in the brain, and each of those neurons are connected by 10,000 connections. And it's very similar to the way that humans are now connected by the internet and social media and blockchain systems. So if human civilization is this global brain, then we can think of ways to optimize our political systems, our economic systems, based on evolutionary principles and system science principles. And I can talk about some of those things if you like.
You definitely should, because look, obviously this is already fascinating cosmically and everything, but we're primarily a show about politics and about society, and you're talking about a global brain. I have to contend every day with the fact that most people don't appear to have one. So what can we draw from the paradigm that you're talking about? What should we or could we learn from that and apply to our own social structures or governments?
Yeah, so we know that human civilization is this interconnected whole. So we saw that with the 2008 financial collapse. It started here and then it propagated across the planet and almost caused global economic collapse. We saw that with the pandemic. It started in China, but soon after that, the whole world was on lockdown. So we have to recognize that we're this interconnected, interdependent system. And if you understand us as a complex system, then you can understand things that are good for these sort of collective information processing computational systems. So first, you want to have a lot of connections between the components. And when we're talking about the global brain, the humans are the components in the system. So there's always good and bad with technology, with like the internet and social media. But overall,
I've noticed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially now. So you go through these phases, but overall, what it's doing is it's allowing the free flow of information. So any nations that try to cut their people off of the internet, like nations like North Korea or China, that's intrinsically bad for the system. And it may be okay in the short term, but in the long term, it's not sustainable. So you want free flow of information. Diversity is also really important, because when we're becoming interconnected, we don't want to become this like homogenous hive mind that we kind of see. For example, someone could argue that China's government is trying to make it that way because they don't allow for criticism of the government. They don't allow for the bottom-up flow of ideas. So we want to maintain diversity because diversity amongst the parts is what allows for a division of labor and for optimally functioning society. So we want to keep the nations. We want to keep cultural diversity. We want to promote a diversity of ideas, but we also want to have some sort of global integration. So we're not trying to go towards like a complete global government, and we're not trying to be isolationists. We need to be integrated, but we need to maintain the nations while coming together, solve our collective existential problems, because it's only by coming together and sort of using the full computational power of the global brain that will allow us to overcome challenges like the threat of nuclear war, ecological crises like climate change, income inequality. And when I say income inequality, there is a solution to that And we kind of hear about that with this decentralization movement that crypto has made famous. So I can kind of talk about that quickly if you'd like to hear about that.
Sure, really fast. So I did want to ask what I found interesting about, so you've sketched out this path to us being able to deal with these massive, potentially civilization-ending challenges. Interestingly, though, those challenges themselves couldn't exist except through the increased complexity that you've talked about. Like, one Neanderthal can't press a button that wipes out all Neanderthals, but we conceivably could at this point. So it seems like there's got to be an interesting balance there where the complexity you're talking about risks taking down the entire machine, but it also potentially provides the tools to deal with those threats.
Yeah, there's this interesting paradox there. I'm glad you brought that up. But the evolutionary process is kind of paradoxical in that way, because as I mentioned earlier, it is our problems that push us to find solutions and come up with these challenges. So even though the world's becoming more and more complex, and this kind of inevitably leads to an intelligent civilization given enough evolutionary time, we will never reach something like a utopia. And if we do and we think it's a utopia, it's not going to last for long because the world is always changing. It's this complex, chaotic place. So we are always going to have existential challenges. We are always going to need to be using resources and unlocking new forms of resources like solar power, for example. So technology is kind of this double-edged sword, and we need to try to steer the evolutionary process in the right direction. It's a train that we can't stop, this kind of complexification and increase in technological power. So we can't stop it, but we can make sure that it goes in the right direction, and we really have to.
Okay. Just because I know that you brought it up, I didn't want us to lose the thread. You mentioned there about the decentralization.
Yeah, just we're seeing income inequality at levels that we haven't seen before. So all of the wealth is concentrated in the whatever top 1%, 0.1%, and when you have this concentration of resources like power and wealth, it's like having an organism where you're not getting good systemic flow of blood throughout the body, delivering oxygen and nutrients. So when you have income inequality at these levels, you will get, if you believe that the nation is something like a social organism, festering limbs or appendages, and that will affect the whole organism eventually. So we have to try to redistribute the wealth, but I don't think the way to do that is something like a communist model, because that gives government all of this power, and then you're in the situation we were talking about with China. We want a diversity of ideas. We want competition, and capitalism allows that. So we want to think about how to decentralize these resources, and crypto and NFTs provide a good way to do that. I know there are a lot of scams in that area, but there's a lot of ways to use this technology that no one is really talking about. So NFTs can be a platform for crowdfunding. So people that might not be able to raise money from venture capitalists because they're not part of that world can easily create a token for any sort of startup or small business. And then the people who fund that, like, in something like Kickstarter, this would be different than that because they don't just get some sort of gift. They become investors in that project and can share the wealth if the project is successful. So, like I said, technology is good and bad, but these new technologies can basically help us decentralize resources to have a healthier, functioning social organism.
Okay. As we alluded to at the beginning of our talk, the book is on the precipice of coming out. Where can people get it?
You can get it from Amazon or other major retailers like Barnes & Noble, Target. So yeah, you can pre-order now. It's available on the 28th. If you do pre-order and you take a screenshot and email the receipt with your address to theromanceofreality@gmail.com, I will mail you the first 1,000 people a book plate that's signed and numbered. That's like a little sticker that goes in the book. And yeah, you can also follow Road to Omega YouTube channel and Substack. Follow me on Twitter at Bobby Azarian. I'm going to be talking about these ideas a lot and trying to build a community that can, help me and the people who are helping me design this sort of apply these principles from system science to optimizing society.
Awesome. Bobby, pleasure to talk to you as always. Congrats on the new book, and hope people check it out. Had a fun talk. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much, John. Thank you for having me.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.